Hello, and welcome to the 25th episode of my Failed Franchises Rail Operators series, as well as the third episode of my Welsh Operators mini-series. Today, we are looking at Arriva Trains Wales, an operator which ran for nearly 15 years, and had a network spanning the breadth of Wales. But were they any good, and should they, perhaps, be deemed as a failure? Find out in this two-part episode, with this first one covering Arriva Trains Wales operations up until 2017. Do like, subscribe, and consider joining the channel for exclusive perks and early access to videos. Thank you. During the privatisation of Britain's railway network in the late 1990s, there was much debate over how Wales's franchises should be organised. Eventually, it was decided that Wales would be split into 3 franchises. First North Western would operate the northwest section of England and northern Wales to Holyhead. Then there would be the Valley Lines franchise for local services in and around Cardiff. Finally, the Wales and West franchise served the remainder of South and West Wales, as well as areas in South West England. Central Trains would also operate services along the Cambrian coastline, and there would be intercity services in the south of Wales provided by Great Western Trains and Virgin. In 2000, the Strategic Rail Authority announced it wanted a single all-Wales franchise, with National Express taking over all services in Wales by the end of 2003 under the Wales and Borders franchise. The previous Wales and West services that operate in the south of England were incorporated into Wessex Trains and later into the first Great Western franchise. Some First North Western services were also incorporated into the Transparent Express and Northern franchises. I've made videos on all the former Welsh operators, including First North Western and Central Trains. By August 2003, the Wales and Borders franchise was up for grabs and was won by Arriva, branded as Arriva Trains Wales. Arriva promised a more integrated Welsh transport network, as well as a focus on using the Welsh language. Also, Arriva Trains Wales promised to introduce 7 more Class 150s to increase capacity, as well as a new simplified timetable, and the abolishment of the £1 cycle reservation system, as well as improving compensation schemes for passengers. In December 2003, Arriva Trains Wales commenced operations on what would be a 15-year contract until 2018. Arriva would operate services across the heart of Wales, including North Wales, Mid, South Wales and in and around Cardiff. In North Wales, services would run from Holyhead and Llandudno towards Shrewsbury, Manchester, Birmingham and Cardiff, as well as shuttle service along the Conwy Valley Line to Blaenau Festiniog from Llandudno. As well as this, Arriva Trains Wales ran services along the Borderlands line from Wrexham to Bidston, with connections onward to Liverpool. In Mid Wales, services would run along the Cambrian line from Aberystwyth, Pwllheli and Machynlleth towards Shrewsbury and Birmingham New Street. Also, Arriva Trains Wales operated the remote Heart of Wales line, running from Shrewsbury to Swansea via Llanelli and Llandudno, Wales, with the line being popular for its stunning scenery. In the south, Arriva Trains Wales operated from Carmarthen, Fishguard Harbour, Tenby and Milford Haven towards the capital. Arriva would also operate along the Swan Line between Swansea and Cardiff. In Cardiff and the Valleys, Arriva would operate a frequent service from Pontypridd, Treherbert, Cardiff Central, Aberdare, Merthyr Tydfil, Bargoed and Rhymney. Arriva upgraded the timetable to introduce up to 6 trains an hour between Pontypridd and Cardiff, and 4 trains an hour from Bargoed to Cardiff. Arriva would also upgrade several stations on the Treherbert and Rhymney lines to accommodate 6-car trains. Finally, Arriva also operated some services from Carmarthen and Swansea towards Brighton, Bristol, Portsmouth, Plymouth and Penzance via Cardiff. Eventually, First Great Western and South West Trains would take over all the running of these services. Arriva would operate all service in Wales, except for the Great Western Railway and cross-country services. The first few years for Arriva weren't too dreadful. They completed most of their franchise obligations and improved the timetable for most journeys. However, for passengers, the rolling stock would let Arriva down. They inherited a fleet of all diesel multiple units dating from the mid-1980s and 90s. The infamous Pacer trains, Class 142s and 143s, operated local services in and around the Welsh capital, with the 30 Pacers roughly following the operations of the former Valley Lines company. Arriva inherited 29 Class 150s, adding an additional 7 shortly after beginning operations, with these units being used across the network, being able to operate to most locations, including services to Manchester, Holyhead and Birmingham. The one-carriage Class 153s also saw deployment across the network, running local services around Shrewsbury and southern Wales. Arriva also inherited Class 158s. These operated on the Birmingham, Aberystwyth and Holyhead services, as well as some Manchester services, and would be the only train to be able to be operated along the Cambrian coastline after its ECTS in-cab signalling improvements. The 158s would also operate out of Cardiff towards northern Wales, which also related to the Class 175s, which were built in the late 1990s and early 2000s. The 27 Class 175s operated exclusively on regional services across Wales and into England. However, at first, Arriva had to share the units with the brand new First Transparent Express franchise, until the new company got their Class 185s delivered. First Transparent Express required 11 Class 175s per day. This relatively old fleet was by no means terrible, but local services, especially on the Pacers and Class 150s, were deeply unpopular, with most services being extremely busy due to unprecedented passenger growth. However busy though, Arriva Trains Wales were relatively reliable, averaging around a 90% on-time rate in their first 6 years of operations, climbing up to 96% by 2014. By 2004, Arriva had already achieved one of its main goals, to include more bilingual signage and include Welsh-spoken customer service. Bilingual signs were introduced in all Welsh stations where the name differed from the English one, and a Welsh telephone line was introduced in 2004, which won the best Welsh website of that year. A year later, the Glamorgan line was reopened to passenger traffic for the first time in 40 years. The line from Bridgend to Cardiff via Rhys opened on the 10th of June 2005, costing £17 million. The line did have some controversy, mostly due to the poor frequency of the line, having just one train an hour, which the Welsh Conservatives suggested was lacking ambition. 2005 was not just about lines reopening though, there was also a threat of lines closing. The Borderlands line, linking Wrexham to Bidston, was at risk of closure, with then Transport Secretary Alistair Darling suggesting that the government did not want to be in the business of catering fresh air around the country. The Strategic Rail Authority claimed that unless the line could be proved to be viable, cuts would have to be made. Luckily, Arriva ran several special offers and cut back on some maintenance of stations, allowing the line to eventually remain open. In 2006, the Transport Wales Act was passed, putting all responsibilities for the franchise in the government's hands, with the government closely coordinating operations with Arriva. This saw direct services between North and South Wales reintroduced fully, with in 2006 Arriva purchasing a Class 121 bubble car unit for shuttle services from Cardiff Bay to Cardiff Queen Street. This would free up a spare Class 153 or Class 150 Sprinter unit to be deployed elsewhere across the network, with Arriva struggling to cope with the increasing demand for services. In 2008, another major route was reopened, putting more strain on its stock, the line to Ebbw Vale. Ebbw Vale Parkway opened on the 6th of February 2008, with the route finally extended all the way to Ebbw Vale Town by May 2015. New stations were built in Llanhilleth, Newbridge, Crosskeys, Risco and Pontimeister, Rogerston and Pye Corner, which opened later in 2014. The line was a huge success and smashed all targets, achieving over 570,000 passenger journeys in its first full year of operations. Also in 2008, Arriva extended all its services from Birmingham New Street into Birmingham International, due to New Street being at capacity for terminating services. Elsewhere in 2008, Arriva launched a new Premier service between Holyhead and Cardiff. The service, originally named the Gerald of Wales, was funded by the government as a premium way of travelling the long journey between North and South Wales. Arriva subleased 4 Class 57 locomotives from Virgin West Coast, with 1 Mark III and 3 Mark II carriages. In 2009, Arriva attempted to gain permission to run a service from Aberystwyth to London Marylebone via Birmingham International and Leamington Spa. 2 services would have run per day, with additional services on weekends and in the summer. Unfortunately, the government was concerned that they would directly compete and possibly outcompete the Wrexham and Shropshire Open and Access operator, and wouldn't allow the operator to be profitable. Thus, in March 2010, for competition reasons, Arriva's bid was rejected. Ironically, Wrexham and Shropshire ceased operations just over a year later. Finally, for 2010, Arriva Trains Wales and Arriva as a whole was bought out by Deutsche Bahn, the state-owned German rail operator. This would mean any potential profits from Arriva Trains Wales would go directly to the German state. In 2012, the Premier Loco Haul service was upgraded, with Class 67s now taking over from the 57s, and newer Mark IIIs replacing the older Mark IIs, running now with a driving van trailer. Also in 2012, the route was rerouted to avoid Crewe and would now call via Wrexham General and Chester. Under Arriva Trains Wales, the Premier service and later the business class services to promote business travellers ran up to twice a day, with an 0532 and 0751 departures from Holyhead towards Cardiff, and a 1615 and 1818 return service. However, in 2013, Arriva's fleet shrank, with the single Class 121 bubble car being withdrawn after a major failure, leading to the unit being deemed unviable for repairs. The single unit, built in 1961, became a spare parts donor for sister Arriva company, Chiltern Railways, who finally retired their 2 remaining Class 121s in 2017. In 2014, a third Mark III set was introduced to run from Holyhead to Manchester. Also in 2014, Arriva increased services on the Cambrian and Heart of Wales lines. Arriva introduced an hourly peak service between Aberystwyth and Shrewsbury, and more evening services on the Cambrian coast between Barmouth and Pwllheli. Arriva also introduced an extra journey from Llandovery to Swansea, and between Llandrindod and Crewe via Shrewsbury along the Heart of Wales line. The move came to improve connections across Wales, especially for Aberystwyth students at the university. To introduce the hourly service along the Cambrian coast, Network Rail had to close 5 level crossings along the line. However, although these improvements were a success, the improvements to the Premier service to all Mark III operations proved to be a little more chaotic. In September 2014, a door on one of the Mark III coaches was ripped off its hinges in a tunnel whilst running in the Bangor area on a peak time service towards Cardiff. Although no injuries occurred, it did hint at poor Arriva Trains Wales maintenance on its trains, and if the service was overcrowded, which it usually was, then the outcome could have been far worse. Arriva said that safety was a priority, and there were no other similar incidents throughout Arriva's remaining years off service, although the incident shouldn't have happened in the first place. 2014 was the year services really began to decline, with overcrowding now being publicly reported in mainstream news due to the frequency of overcrowding. Arriva had to issue a public apology in November following high levels of overcrowding in the previous month. Arriva blamed leaves on the line, trains hitting trees, and freight trains breaking down, leading to a reduced number of trains able to be deployed each day, and services being curtailed frequently. Arriva Trains Wales had to take stock from local services such as Class 150s and 153s to be used to run regional long-distance services due to the overall lack of stock. This lack of stock was caused by leaves on the line, affecting the wheels on trains, leading to far more repairs than usual. As well as this, 2 Class 175s had serious maintenance issues from hitting a tree. In December, Arriva launched an investigation whereby passengers were forced to ride in the driver's cab due to severe overcrowding. The overcrowding led to poor publicity and seriously hindered the reputation of Arriva Trains Wales. This was exacerbated by a 48-hour RMT strike that occurred in November 2015. The RMT claimed that Arriva hadn't made an adequate pay offer, despite the RMT postponing previous strikes to allow for talks to take place. The 48-hour strike led to all RMT drivers not booking for any duty between Thursday and Friday, with most services cancelled or curtailed, and some stations not receiving any rail service on the 2 strike days. In 2015, upgrades to the line between Wrexham and Chester would be delayed until 2017, despite being given the go-ahead initially back in 2013. The upgrade would eventually see a 5.5-mile stretch of track between Rosset and Saltney doubled to enable an hourly service to run. Several level crossings were also planned to be upgraded as part of the project, costing £44 million. This delay led to overcrowding on services along the line, and services being far more infrequent than they should be. Strikes also hindered Arriva in early 2016, with ASLEF taking 24-hour walkouts. Elsewhere in 2016, 4 of the Class 175s Arriva operated were forced to be taken out of service due to corrosion issues with the fleet. All of the Class 150s also had corrosion problems, with the whole fleet undergoing repairs across 2016, leading to huge capacity shortages, with Arriva Trains Wales, for whatever reason, unable to run their loco hauled stock at weekends to boost capacity, most likely due to the lack of crews trained on the sets. Arriva Trains Wales used all available units per day to meet capacity demand for services, so even 1 or 2 Class 175s and 150s being out of service was detrimental to the overall service. Although the company managed to fix the 175s and 150s by the summer, just a few months later the yearly reports were out regarding the company's finances. They recorded that Arriva made a 6.9% profit after tax, nearly double the amount that similar train companies of similar sizes made. Economy Minister Ken Skates suggested that Arriva were galling for government investment when it was really not needed. The franchise was also the most heavily subsidised in the UK, receiving up to £160 million a year. Arriva combated high profits by highlighting how they invested more money into the franchise than stated in their contract, and that the 2003 franchise failed to anticipate the high passenger growth that Wales had seen, passing 30 million passengers for the first time. Despite these complaints, nothing would compete versus the poor service seen by Arriva Trains Wales a year later, in 2017. However, to ensure that this video isn't half an hour long, and to balance out my workload, I think this is a suitable point to end Part 1 of Arriva Trains Wales. We've looked at the first 12 years of Arriva Trains Wales operations, and although we have only 2 years left to cover in Part 2, those 2 years were hectic ones, with overcrowding, complaints and fines, as well as the transition to the new Transport for Wales operator, who promised to transform Welsh rail travel. Thanks for watching this third episode of my Welsh Operators mini-series, and I hope you enjoyed this first part on my remaster of Arriva Trains Wales. Special thanks to my first class members Callum Martin Bell and Crispin McKee, as well as my business zone members Andrew Bowen, Anthony Harris, Anthony James Moore, ARK, Conor Grieg, Craig Mitchell 43, Gordon Walker, Jay Teco, Lewis C21 and NJTE. You can get your name on this list from as little as £2.99 a month and help me to make my videos. I really do appreciate it. Thank you. Also, thanks to everyone who let me use their footage for today's video. You can find their channels in the description or pinned comment. Once again, thank you for watching. Check out my Instagram and my Discord linked in the description below, and I'll see you soon for Part 2. Goodbye.